Welcome to the Social Impact Journal, the podcast meeting founders, innovators, and experts driving change in our world.
When I was very young, I always knew that I wanted to do something in which I was going to make some kind of a positive impact in the world to people. 1,000 Voices is a podcast that I started where we're on a mission to interview 1,000 Black British change makers. That it isn't something I thought about and started about the next day, but far from it. So it's always been there. That was driven by me wanting to do something to challenge negative stereotypes and to put out more positive stories. I'm a massive believer in the power of storytelling. I think storytelling is so key. And if you're a social entrepreneur, if you're a change maker and you're not utilizing storytelling, you're missing a trick.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Social Impact Journal. I'm very excited for today's discussion with Tevin. Tevin, how are things this morning?
Things are good. It's lovely, this very warm June morning. Yeah, thank you for having me on. Much appreciated, Jack.
No problem. So you're in London right now?
Just outside London. I grew up in London, but I've got married and moved out to Essex. But I'm going into London later on.
Okay, great. So we'll soon get into talking about your initiative, 1,000 Voices. But I'd first like to understand about your career journey and how you got to this point.
Yeah, my career journey is quite atypical, I think. I haven't really come across anyone that's had a similar career journey to mine. Quite different. So I started off I just got to do it in a nutshell, but when I was very young, I always knew that I wanted to do something in which I was going to make some kind of a positive impact in the world to people. I didn't know what form that I was going to take exactly. And then over time, when I got into teenage years, I thought, okay, cool, I'm going to become a doctor. You know, you see, I was watching Holby City, you see like they're the ones saving lives. I thought, great, I'm going to do that as well. So I've done my science, studied my sciences in A-levels. I went and interned at a GP for a couple of weeks when I was about 16, 17 in college, and then realized that isn't exactly what I want to do. It's good, and of course it's a noble profession, but the kind of change I was looking to make was more societal and wide sweeping. And then I was at a bit of a lurch and just thinking, what am I going to do? Okay, I read Richard Branson's book, Losing My Virginity, amazing autobiography. And that's what literally set me down this path of entrepreneurship. And I thought to myself, you know what, this is it. This is how I'm going to be able to make the kind of change I want to do in the wide sweeping societal fashion. So yeah, I mean, I started a few businesses here and there, research into also different kinds of industries. And this is where my first major career professional career start was, because I always knew I wanted to, well, from that point, I knew I wanted to go into entrepreneurship. I wasn't sure what industry and that kind of thing. But in researching, I discovered a bit more about the fashion industry and how crazy it is on a human level, on an environmental level. And really reading into it, you hear about things here and there. There was the famous, or infamous, I should even say, Rana Plaza factory collapse back in 2011, 2012. I might be getting the date slightly wrong, so don't quote me. But in Bangladesh, where over 1,000 people died. And that one was massive. It was all over the news. But then there's a crazy side of the fashion industry that we don't see, especially when it comes to fast fashion. And on the toxic side of things as well, you've got toxins that pollute waters that people are drinking, and environments like landfills. It's crazy, and it's one of the biggest industries in the world. So I decided, okay, cool, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to get into that and try and make a change. So when I do things, I don't do things by the half. I feel like I'm quite extreme sometimes. So I went and studied fashion, literally. I went to university, London College of Fashion, studied fashion business, wanted to learn about the business side of things. Whilst I was studying, I started up my first business, my first major business, I should say, which was called Mr. Kittoe, which was a menswear fashion retailer, selling ethically made fashion from independent designers. The idea with that was to promote ethically made fashion where there wasn't no human or environmental cost behind what was being made, and then trying to work for independence as well. So it's a bit unique in its curation and and that kind of thing, and support up and coming designers. So I ran that for a couple of years. Amazing experience. And then after that, because I'd studied fashion, kind of closed me off. So I worked in fashion for another year afterwards in merchandising. Left that, went to university again, studied the masters, and then gone back into the professional world working in finance. And that's been my professional career. But alongside that, I have done things here and there. Like I volunteered as a youth leader for 6 years. And that was, again, just part of me wanting to give back to society in some kind of way. Done, things here and there. And then it's all led me to where I am now and things I'm working on now, which I feel is the next step in me wanting to drive that kind of societal change that I want to see.
Thanks so much, Tevin, for that introduction. And you mentioned around reading Richard Branson's autobiography. I think we'll come on to that a little bit later when we talk about your 1,000 Voices and one of the shout outs that he gave to you. So after the fashion business, what was next?
After the fashion business, so we closed that down in 2016. And after that, I was still studying. Fashion business. So finished that in 2017. And then worked at the Arcadia Group in merchandising. And that was for a year. Basically, that one is one of those things I just sort of fell into. To be honest, my heart wasn't in it. I just needed the job. And my background was in fashion. So there was only so much I could go for. But I worked at the Arcadia Group for a year. It was cool, I met some cool people, good experience. Deep down, I knew I was never going to be there forever because I didn't see, it's not what drives me. I'm very much, I'm the person. I feel like I'm very much driven by my passions and my ideals and what I want to do and what I want to see. It isn't always about, money and that kind of thing. I mean, it's important, don't get me wrong, but I've learned literally through trial and error, through trying to run things and start things here and there, that money is definitely not my sole motivator. Because if that's the only thing, I literally cannot motivate myself to get up every day and to work on whatever it is. There needs to be something more to it. And Arcadia Group was, it's money, it's cool, it's a job, but it wasn't motivating me in the way I wanted to be motivated. So it was always a short-term thing. And that was immediately after I ran that business, my first major business.
Understood. So then I'd like to understand the pathway for you to go from there in 2018, then through, of course, what we had with COVID, and then with 1,000 Voices, and how that started.
Yeah, so the pathway. So after I finished working at Arcadia, I went back to university, done a master's in international business and development. The development part was key again because my thread has always been entrepreneurship and using that as a means to drive positive change. And I wanted to see how international organizations can play a role in driving development, driving socioeconomic development, positive change in the world. So I made sure to study that. And then the 1,000 Voices. So for a bit of background, 1,000 Voices is a podcast that I started where we're on a mission to interview 1,000 Black British change makers. That it isn't something I thought about and started about the next day, but far from it. I thought about this a long time ago. Funny story, I'm married now. Like I said at the start, I moved out to Essex, but when I first met my wife, in fact, our first ever date, I was telling her about 1,000 Voices. It's like, yeah, I'm thinking about starting up this thing. This was back in 2017. It was a long time ago. But, you've got loads of things happening, and then I hadn't fleshed it out. It was just a thought in my head from a long time ago. So it's always been there. That was driven by me wanting to do something to challenge negative stereotypes and to put out more positive stories. I'm a massive believer in the power of storytelling. I think storytelling is so, so key. And if you're a social entrepreneur, if you're a change maker and you're not utilizing storytelling, you're missing a trick. Like really, that's how you're going to get people to empathize with your cause, how you're going to draw that human connection, how you're going to actually drive change in the people that you're trying to, get them to change their behaviors and whatnot. Got to utilize storytelling as much as possible. So, and that was like the bedrock behind 1,000 Voices. So that's been in my head for a long time. I was studying and then working or whatever and fleshing it out, not fully, not seriously I should say, but fleshing it out in my head over time, nothing on paper. When I initially come up with the idea, it was meant to be a book even. I wanted to write a book. Just interviewing interesting Black Britons, putting out different types of stories, and inspirational, And then I started the podcast. It moved to podcast because I felt digital media is where it's at. It's growing. It's a bit easier to get your message out far and wide as opposed to having a book. And then decided on a podcast. I thought, okay, we're just gonna. I picked an arbitrary number, 1,000, because it sounds like a nice lofty target, and thought, yeah, cool, let's get 1,000 good stories out there. You know, the news, as I'm sure you know, and I'm sure as listeners may agree with anyways, the news is overwhelmingly negative. I try not to watch it myself. You turn on the news, it's a lot of doom and gloom, and I think that maybe there is a space for that kind of thing. Of course, you need to know what's happening in the world, but I do believe in balance, and we should be able to balance that with more positive storytelling and positive stories. There's good news happening out there each and every single day, and I think that those stories need to be platformed. And all of these were sort of driving forces, and of course some of my own experiences. Like I've got some of my own personal experiences, friends, family, just so many that I can draw upon that have taught me that there's too much negative thoughts and stereotypes when it comes to Black Britons that we got to dispel. And there's so much behind it. I don't think there's one individual instance that caused me to say, you know what, I'm going to start this thing. I think it's just a collection of different experiences that in the end, you know, you hear one too many stories, or you've gone through one too many things, you just think, you know what, let's do something about this. And that's what 1,000 Voices, that's where it started from. With 1,000 Voices, so when I started it, like I said, it's evolved over time. It's been a few different things, a book, and then interesting people, and then inspirational, and change makers, etc. And now it's undergone another evolution in my head again, although we haven't realized that evolution yet. When I first started it, it was a podcast. So I marketed it as a podcast. That's literally what the name, 1,000 Voices. It's a podcast. Now I see it as more of a media platform. So the podcast is a form of media that we're putting out, but I do want to expand into put out other forms of media, and they can be many different types of forms, because you might have someone that might want to listen to a podcast. Cool, great, we've got content for you. You might want someone that wants a documentary, a short film, entertainment, a game show, news, whatever. There's so many different forms of media. We'll put out different things, but behind all of it, the same driving force is to, one, challenge negative stereotypes, and two, inspire more Black British change makers along the way. And that's what we're about. Yeah, we're 1,000 Voices.
Amazing. I really love this project. I mean, this is similar to why we started the Social Impact Journal, to try and share stories of, you know, entrepreneurs in different countries who are doing great things. So we've had entrepreneurs from Brazil and Kenya, Nigeria on the podcast in series 1. I'd love to know maybe some of the positive stories that you've had on your podcast, some of the Black Britain change makers. Can you share maybe one or two stories?
Yeah, there's so many, because I've interviewed 50 people so far. Well, yeah. More than 50. I've put out 50 episodes, I should say. Then we've got a few in the back burner we haven't released yet. But there's been some amazing ones. There've been some people who have been very vulnerable on the podcast, and have really, you know, delved into some very personal stuff. And that's always powerful when you can do that kind of a thing. A couple that come to mind is, so we had an episode, I don't know the episode number, but with Jamelia, the singer. And then she came and told the story. So she had a hit single called Thank You. Yeah, I think it was Thank You. Yeah. And she tells the story behind it. And it was basically about domestic abuse she was undergoing when she was really young. I think she was like a teenager at the time, or a teenager into her early 20s, and domestic abuse. And telling that story about that, her overcoming it, and where she is now, where down to her back then, everything, like, it's extremely vulnerable. When you hear stories like that, it's always very, very powerful. We've had entrepreneurs who come and lay down the blueprint to how they've been able to navigate and get to where they are. We've had activists, we've had all sorts, creatives, musicians. We've had quite a few different people who are all successful in their own right, who are doing whatever they're doing in their own right, but have all treaded different paths to get to wherever they are today.
Thanks so much, Tevin, and we'll make sure to link to a few of those episodes in the show notes. So if any of our listeners want to tune into 1,000 Voices, they can. Maybe just to ask for another story around entrepreneurship, because a lot of our podcast listeners here are in the international development community and are founders of social enterprises. So is there one story that stands out for you in terms of an entrepreneur laying down their blueprint for success?
Yeah. I'll give you one. Actually, I think it's the second episode I even recorded, the second or third, one of the two. But it's a guy called William Adewasi, and he's an entrepreneur. He got a watch brand called Vitae, and it's a social business, if that's the word to use. He's a social entrepreneur. So his business, for every watch they sell, they either donate a set of school uniform or a solar powered lamp to children in sub-Saharan Africa. And I know they work a lot in Ghana. I think there's a few other countries they work in. So there's that strong social thread behind the business they do. And in that episode was very much, we did talk a bit about his journey, but then on top of that, there was very much like very tangible entrepreneurship, like advice for entrepreneurs. Where I asked them things like, what set you apart? I can't remember the exact questions, but like, what kind of things set you apart? What kind of mindset do you feel like you needed to have? How did you market your business? Very tangible bits of advice. And that was quite good. Yeah, 2 or 3, William Adewasi, that one was.
Okay, thanks, Tevin. We'll make sure to link to that, and I'll watch that myself. So, what I saw on Twitter when I was looking through and doing my research, there was a recent tweet from Sir Richard Branson, and you mentioned at the start of the podcast that you had read his autobiography and it was very inspiring. So, what was that tweet that came from him shouting out your work?
Yeah, that was crazy. Yeah. If you're watching this on YouTube and you look behind me, you see my bookshelf. I've got one of his biographies behind me. Actually, I've read. That's the second biography. I read his first one like 5-6 times or something. Now, I don't reread books usually. I read it once and I put it to the side. But that one I've gone back to so many times because that's literally what started me off down the path I'm on right now. That tweet from Richard Branson. So it was to do with a competition that I had entered and fortunately was a finalist for. So there's one of the Virgin businesses, Virgin Unite, is a registered charity and they just do a lot of good work, basically in a nutshell. And they had a competition called the Founders Unite competition, which is for Black and underrepresented founders. And we just enter that competition, and if you win, then you receive some support in kind in a partnership with them. So I'd entered that. Did not think anything of it because, to be honest, like maybe a bit of that imposter syndrome. I don't like using the word imposter syndrome at all, because for loads of different reasons, but I don't want to self-diagnose and sort of use that kind of language. But a bit of that, I'm so early on. I've got massive vision from where I want to take 1,000 Voices. Massive vision. So early on, and right now, essentially the only thing we've put out so far is a podcast. And then there's these other businesses that I know have applied, and they're just so much further on in their journeys. So I just applied anyway, just sort of cool, whatever. But I completely forgot about it. And then got an email saying, yeah, you're a finalist. I'm in final 3. And I was like, wow, okay, crazy. Against 2 other very, very good businesses as well, Pound Divine and Ultra Education. 2 amazing businesses in their own right, doing great work. Are very much more established than what 1,000 Voices was again. But I think it was maybe the vision and everything behind what we wanted to do, which is what resonated with people. Because it must have been that, it's the vision. So as part of that, I worked with a pitch coach, went to pitch to a room full of entrepreneurs, social entrepreneurs, Virgin people, people involved in policy, etc. Just like that kind of a crowd of people. We had to pitch them, and then they would decide who would win. Unfortunately, became a runner-up, a very close runner-up actually, but it's cool. It is what it is, and I think that was it helped to validate what we're doing with 1,000 Voices. Even though I would say we were early on, and all of that, there is a massive vision. As to what we literally want to drive societal change with 1,000 Voices, and it helped to validate that. And then with that, so the person who runs the Virgin Unite arm is Holly Branson. That's Richard Branson's daughter. So she was doing a little intro, and she was like, "Oh yeah, someone wanted to say hello or something like that to you," and then played a video. So the video hasn't been released publicly, but then has it? No, I don't think it has. No, it hasn't been released publicly. It definitely hasn't. There's a video of Richard Branson, and he's talking, and he's saying, "Yeah, shout out to Found the Finance, shout out to Ultra Education, shout out to 1,000 Voices. They're doing XYZ, great work." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, that's so cool." And then he done the tweet as well, and he done tweet. I think he's put on LinkedIn and on Facebook as well. Giving us a bit of a shout out. So that was quite quite cool, full circle moment.
Yeah, it must have been a very, very surreal time to see that and to be tagged on that. And you go onto Twitter and you see it's from Sir Richard Branson.
It was very surreal. And then I've opened up Twitter and I've seen that. And then all of these, you'd be surprised how many fake Richard Branson pages there are. Because after that, I've seen all these random Richard Branson pages following me and liking stuff. I'm thinking, wait, what? And I'll check it out. And it's like Richard Branson 25712. Okay, so many. But
you have a whole Richard Branson fan club now.
Yeah. Yeah. But it was cool, surreal, definitely, man. Like crazy to see that.
Amazing. So we were talking off air about something that you working towards called the C strategy for 1,000 voices. So I'd be really keen if you can share to the audience what exactly the C strategy is.
Yeah, definitely. SEE, and that's a part of when I talk about the big vision behind 1,000 voices. It's crazy because it started off as in my head as a book interviewing interesting people, and it's evolved over time to now the media platform. But again, there's a division behind it. So the C, SEE, is the framework that we're working towards. The S is for show, E for educate, then E for empower. If we start off with S, the show, that's where we are right now. It's about showcasing these amazing stories and putting out good, positive media, challenging negative stereotypes and that kind of thing. So it's like we're showing these Black Britons that are watching it like, cool, you can do it. There are people who have already done it and we're showing you that it can be done. So then it's like the first step. Okay, you got, in order to start to drive change and to be successful, whatever, I think it starts off with that belief and that kind of thing. A lot of people haven't even seen someone who looks like them or comes from a similar background to them or anything like that in a position, in that kind of a position. So it's, putting them out there as much as possible, showing you, cool, it can be done. Develop that self-belief. Going to the E, educate. Then from there, the next step is to educate you and show you, okay, we've shown you how it can be done. Then we're going to give you the blueprint, how exactly you can go about and drive change. I'm not sure exactly what form that's going to take, but we've started to very, very slowly move into that now, actually. But I'm not sure exactly, how that's going to finish up. Could be in the form of a school or whatever, some sort. Could be in the form of like online things and digital. I'm not too sure exactly, but it's all educating people. And then the last one is to empower. So we've shown you it can be done. We've shown you the stories that it can be done. We've educated you on how exactly it can be done. Then we're going to empower you to go out and to actually do it, like to drive change and to be successful in your endeavors. The empowerment side of things, I see that being a fund of some sort. Again, we're not there yet, so that could evolve. But we know what we want to do. The exact mechanisms aren't 100% defined, but that's what we're working towards with 1,000 voices.
Amazing. And you mentioned that you're 50 episodes into the podcasting. That's the S in terms of show. Then you're coming down into educate, and that's where you are right now in terms of building out what that might look like. Yeah.
We're moving there slowly. So I had a conversation with an amazing woman called Joanna Martin, doing great work with a few different social enterprises, and she was giving me she's big on the education side of things, and she was helping me really flesh that side of things out. And then it became apparent, why don't we just start now? I was thinking, let's work and scale and that kind of thing. But, to be honest, there's not really anything stopping us from doing it right now, in all honesty. Mm-hmm. So started to slowly move into that. And the form that's taken now is we've launched a Patreon program. And one of the tiers within the Patreon program is to every single month to have a live Q&A with some sort of a social entrepreneur, change maker, whoever who is doing good work in their life or driving change or success or whatever, and just for people to come and then directly talk to them and have a Q&A with them. And yeah, it's educational in the sense that these are people who are literally already done it. You can have a candid conversation with them. If you're looking to do something similar, you can have a candid conversation with them and get the blueprint there and then. So I think that's how we're slowly moving into the educated side of things, and then we're going to definitely build upon that some more in the years to come.
Amazing. So maybe a different question now. This is a global podcast. We have guests from all over the world. So I'm always interested in asking travel questions. So where is your favorite place that you've had the opportunity to travel to, and why?
Oh my gosh. I feel like I should travel more, but my favorite place is probably St. Lucia. So I went there in was it last year? Yeah, May 22, I think it was. And that was my honeymoon. So I got married in October 21, and then we postponed the honeymoon for a while.
Hmm.
Finally went in May 22. And, oh, so good. Like, I think the people are so nice. It's a different type of, like, it's a slower pace compared to the UK, especially compared to London. People are just slower, and I felt happier and friendlier, and it's warm all the time, good food. Like, it just is so cool. It's a different type of energy when you're out there, I feel. And it's amazing. Probably my favorite place I've been to.
Amazing. That's great. And just a quick one, anyone that's watching on YouTube right now, Tevin's social media handles have been running down the bottom of the screen, so you can find him and follow there. I think before we close up, a question I ask to all of our guests in the Social Impact Journal is for a piece of advice that we can actually put into the Social Impact Journal. So I think a question that I can ask you is, if you're a social entrepreneur out there, founder, maybe leader of a community-based organization, you mentioned at the start about the power of storytelling. So can you give any tips and tricks for those organizations about how to most effectively use storytelling to amplify their message and their cause?
Yeah, definitely. And I'll reiterate what I said at the start. If you're involved in this social impact space and you're trying to do good work and you're not using storytelling, you're really missing a trick. And I think you've just got to do as much as possible, storytelling. I'll give an example. So I wrote about something in my newsletter a few months ago. So it was during the Syrian refugee crisis a few years ago. And, we hear about these things all the time in the news, not to discredit it or to play it down, but, you hear about different crises and things like that in the news all the time. And then you can become desensitized to things if you're hearing the same message all the time. There was a story and a picture of a young boy, I think he was 2 or 3 years old, called Alan Kurdi, who passed away on the beach. And then there was a picture of him that went viral of him just laying lifeless on the beach. He passed away, him and his family trying to cross the channel to get away from where it was they were escaping from. Now, with that so when you first hear about, okay, there's a refugee crisis, etc., cool, whatever, like, it might go over some people's heads. When now we've taken this one little boy and you hear his story and you hear about what he's escaping from and everything in that tragic end, it brings like that human element to it, like in a way that hearing facts and figures can't. Storytelling brings those facts and figures to life, and that's how people are going to connect with your cause and with what you're trying to do. I think that there's so many storytelling frameworks. There's a lot out there. One famous one is the hero's journey. I think it's John Campbell that wrote that. But that one's like a 9-step process in how to craft a nice, compelling story. Take a look at that. But there's quite a few, and there's simpler ones you can look at. But I would say with whoever it is you're trying to work with, get some stories and put some content out there. I know it's extra work, but that's what's going to really help to drive some of the change you're trying to make.
Thanks so much for that advice, Tevin. And it's been great to have you on the Social Impact Journal this morning. Please go and enjoy the heat wave in London this weekend. I'm not sure when the podcast is released on the 19th, whether the heat will still be here or the rain's upon us. But go and enjoy it for now.
Definitely, I will do. Got to enjoy it whilst we can, because British weather. Sunny like that. Tomorrow's going to be downpour, so yeah, for sure, I will do.
For sure. Well, thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me.